Today, we're going to dive into a really tough family situation, but we're going to look at it through a clear scientific lens. This explainer is all about an attachment-based model for understanding what's known as parental alienation, and we're going to ground this really difficult topic in some solid, established psychology.
I mean, this is the question, isn't it? It's the one that's just so heart-wrenching. You have a child who was once super close with a parent, and then suddenly, seemingly out of nowhere, they are hostile and want nothing to do with them. It just doesn't make any sense on the surface. Well, this explainer is going to give us a framework that helps us understand exactly why this happens.
So, here's the game plan. First, we'll talk about that confusing rejection itself. Then, we'll introduce the core scientific argument. After that, we'll break that argument down into 3 main pillars, and you'll see how they all connect. And finally, we'll wrap up with why having this framework is so incredibly important for everyone involved.
All right, so let's start at the beginning, with the problem itself. That absolutely baffling and painful moment when it feels like a child's love has just vanished, seemingly overnight.
So how in the world do we start to make sense of something like that? Well, the strongest approach suggests we use a new lens. But, and this is the important part, it's a lens that's grounded from well-established, proven science. This is not about inventing something new. It's about applying what we already know to this specific crisis.
And honestly, that's what makes this model so powerful. It's not asking anyone to buy into some new, controversial diagnosis. Instead, it just takes 3 well-established, totally accepted pillars of psychology and applies them. It's all about connecting the dots using principles that have been trusted for decades.
This quote right here, it really nails the fundamental shift that this model is all about. Instead of getting stuck in that horrible, painful loop of who's lying and who's telling the truth, it forces us to focus on what actually matters. What is going on inside the child's mind? It shifts the conversation from blame to diagnosis.
Okay, so let's dig into the first pillar of this framework. It all begins with one of the most powerful forces in a child's life, their deep biological need to connect.
So, you've probably heard of attachment theory. The big idea is that a child's need to bond with their parents is a primary biological drive. It's as real and as powerful as the need for food or water. It's literally hardwired into them for survival. A child naturally wants to love and feel loved by both of their parents.
So if that drive to connect is so natural, what's going wrong here? Well, the model argues the child's rejection isn't a real choice. It's the suppression of that natural attachment system. And this only happens under immense pressure from one parent, a parent the model calls pathogenic or psychologically harmful. The child, for their own psychological survival, feels they have to side with that parent to stay safe in that relationship.
Okay, now let's move on to the second pillar. We're going to zoom out a little bit, from what's going on inside the child's head to the dynamics of the whole family system. This is where you really start to see roles and boundaries just completely break down.
You know, family systems theory basically tells us that a family is like an emotional web. You can't just look at one person in isolation because everyone is connected. One person's actions create these ripple effects that are felt by absolutely everyone in the system.
Now, in these situations, a really destructive process called triangulation starts to happen. It kicks off with intense conflict between the parents, but here's the toxic part. Instead of keeping it an adult issue, one parent pulls the child into the fight. The child literally becomes a weapon in the adult conflict, and that just shatters the healthy boundaries that are supposed to keep a child safe.
And the end result is something called a cross-generational coalition. It's this completely unnatural alliance where the child is basically promoted to the level of a partner, fighting alongside one parent against the other. This just flips the entire family structure upside down. You know, parents are supposed to be a team, leading and protecting the child, not recruiting them as a soldier in a war.
And that leads us right into our third and final pillar. This is the psychological tool, the defense mechanism that a child uses to even cope with this impossible situation. They're forced to adopt this extreme black and white view of their world.
It's a defense mechanism called splitting. And in this situation, the child is essentially taught, either directly or indirectly, to see one parent as perfect, heroic, all good, and the other parent as this terrible, dangerous, all evil person. There's no middle ground.
I mean, just look at this comparison. This is not how kids normally see their parents, right? A healthy kid can think, I love my mom, but I'm really mad at her for taking away my video games. They can hold both ideas. But a child who is splitting is forced into this totally warped reality. One parent is the only source of safety and must be protected at all costs, while the other is the source of all problems and must be feared and rejected.
Okay, so we've looked at these 3 pretty heavy psychological ideas.
Now, let's put all the pieces together and talk about why this framework is such a game changer. It completely reframes how we understand the child's behavior. This summary table lays it out so clearly. Attachment theory tells us how the rejection happens. That natural bonding system gets shut down. Family systems theory tells us where it happens. The child gets trapped in the middle of adult conflict. And the concept of splitting tells us why the child sticks with it. They've had to adopt this distorted, black and white reality just to survive.
So if you take away one single thing from all this, please let it be this. The child's behavior, as confusing and hurtful as it is not a character flaw. It is not a rational choice they are making. It is a symptom. It is an external sign of a very deep problem within the family system.
And it's a symptom that points directly to the influence of one parent. The source material is very clear on this. This behavior is a symptom of one parent's pathogenic or deeply unhealthy parenting. This simple idea changes everything, because the child is no longer the problem. They are the ones showing us the effects of the problem.
So this framework gives us a really powerful diagnostic lens. It helps us understand the what and the why behind a child's rejection. But of course, that leads us to the next, and frankly, the most important question of all. If this is the diagnosis, then what's the cure?